Hey guys, my name is Matthew and I'm an American. Today we're talking about the difference between the US and the UK when it comes to humor. And I don't want to just give you a list of differences. If you want that, you can go Google 15 differences between, comedy in the US versus the UK. This video is specifically going to be about the one thing that is different between our countries when it comes to humor and how it results in all the other differences. And so I'm hoping to pinpoint what is the one main difference between the US and the UK. We have to go through some other differences to get there. Let's get right into it. Look, if you're a British person, one of the first things you're going to say is, yeah, I know the difference between the US and the UK when it comes to humor. The big difference is Americans just don't get irony. They can't understand sarcasm. They don't really understand understatement or whatever it is you're going to say. And so there's this underlying thought, Americans are kind of stupid. I'm not disagreeing with the part of that thought that says Americans are kind of stupid, because we are, but so are British people sometimes. And I don't think that Americans don't get irony or sarcasm. I think that is an oversimplification of a much more complex issue. There's this great article in The Guardian that describes these two guys. I'll link it below. It's a British person and an American, and they're having a conversation. The Brit says, hey, last week I had to go to my granddad's funeral. The American's like, oh, I'm so sorry. That really sucks. Are you okay? Or whatever. And the British guy's like, yeah, no big deal. He'd never bought me any drinks before, so I'm good. And the American goes, I see. I just see the conversation going in my head because I was a part of that conversation so many times when I first moved to the UK. You see, the difference here is just a difference in perspectives. The Brit hears the American's response, and the British person goes, wow, the American must be stupid. Did he not understand I was just kidding? I mean, I didn't signpost or anything, but I was clearly joking. And the American's perspective is, wow, this person has a lot of really unhealthy coping mechanisms. Their granddad just died, and they're making jokes about it. The difference here isn't about understanding humor. The difference here is about cultural perspectives. And so I think when a British person says Americans just don't get our humor, they're missing the fact that we totally do. Even if 100 years ago Americans didn't get British humor, television has brought us so close together. It's so evident from the fact that Americans love Monty Python and The Mighty Boosh that, yes, we get British humor. And even British people get American humor too. We're not just all slapstick and whatever. You guys love Friends, and then American Office is better than British Office. I guess disagree with me in the comments if you want. But I don't know. I think we get each other's humor. I don't think that is the issue. I think there's something much deeper going on. Now, there's another issue I think we need to bring up that I think is key to the conversation. And it's something that happened to me when I was in England. The first few times I went to a few different churches. And I bring up the church specifically because this would never happen, or almost never happen, in the US in a church. I went into a church building, and I met new people, obviously, because I was brand new there and I didn't know anybody. And at several different churches, I would meet someone, and one of the very first things they would do was start making fun of me. They'd peg one of my attributes, the clothes I was wearing, or my stupid American accent, or my hair, or whatever. The hair isn't an easy one, obviously, because it's getting longer, and they would make fun of me for it. And that just wouldn't happen in the United States ever at a church. Maybe not ever, maybe occasionally, but it's really not very common that I would walk in, meet someone new, and one of the very first things they would do is kind of make fun of me, take the mickey out of me, make a jab, whatever you want to call it. That is something that just wouldn't happen. In the US, we tend to be pleasant with each other and say nice things, and where do you go to work, and what do you do for school, and whatever else. And in the UK, all the time, the very first thing that you hear from someone when you're meeting them is these jabs back and forth. It's this kind of, you start off by making fun of each other. And for an American stuck into that situation, I think sometimes it feels jarring. Again, this isn't a question of whether or not an American understands that this person's just making fun of them or just kidding, but it feels different because it doesn't look the same as it does in the United States. This difference is really key in understanding some of the differences between the US and the UK when it comes to humor. There are two other things that we need to talk about to have a full understanding of some of the differences between US and UK's humor. One of them is just the way that humor is delivered. In the UK, humor, I've noticed, is almost always delivered by British people as totally deadpan. You have to kind of pay attention to the words that are being said specifically, and you can't just pay attention to the way that they're delivered to understand when a joke is said. And for American, that can be really difficult because Americans almost always signpost their humor. We have big smiles and like almost, the head movement is a little bit too much, but it almost is that like, do you guys hear my joke? Are you ready? And we do understand the mocking thing. If I'm together with my high school friends, I'm going to, throw out jabs and do the taking the mickey out of people just like you do in the UK. But I'm probably going to signpost a lot of those statements, especially the more harsh and cutting ones with just kidding or, whatever. We signpost our things to make sure that people know when we're telling a joke. The other one that it really is important to understand is that there's a sensitivity surrounding humor in the US. What I mean by that is that there are certain situations, I've already alluded to this, where you just wouldn't ever see humor used or almost never see humor used. One of them is at a funeral. A funeral is a place where humor is not typically used, especially I think of the person attending a funeral, not someone who's running it. Someone attending a funeral isn't coming in telling jokes and laughing and doing all this stuff because, well, that might be considered rude to the close family of the person who died. Humor can be used in places like churches, but it has to be used carefully. It can be used in weddings, but again, it has to be used carefully. And so humor is this thing that is handled with care in most situations. And by comparison, in England, I noticed that humor is used all the time in any situation. And I think that helps us to understand the primary difference between the US and the UK. It has to do with why humor gets used. And so to fully understand that, I have to start by just building a quick base here, something to make sure we're kind of on the same baseline. This is a generality, but in general, Americans are more willing to express their feelings. And British people are less willing to express their feelings, again, generally. And this depends on situations and all sorts of different things. But very, very generally, that's something that is true of our cultures. And so in America, the piece, and this is the crux of the whole argument here, this is, I think, the difference. Americans use humor to express joy or happiness. That's the primary use point of humor, is to express joy or happiness. And we're happy to do that. We do that all the time. We love expressing it, and we love making sure that everyone around us knows that we're happy or joyous or looking for laughter or whatever it is that we're using humor for with all of our signposting and our big smiles. That's kind of the brash forward way of Americans. British people, by comparison, use humor for almost everything else. So I'll say that comparison again. Americans use humor to express joy or happiness, and British people use humor for almost everything else. British people love to use humor to lubricate just about any situation. If it's an awkward new meeting, they'll use humor to make sure that awkward new meeting isn't as awkward for anyone. British people will use humor to hide and deal with their sadness at a funeral or in a specifically bad or a very bad breakup. British people use humor to just make sure that people know that they're smart and that they understand humor. And it's almost revered as this beautiful thing that should be used in every single situation. British people use humor to talk about political things and to make points about political things or religious things or horrible human rights issues, these things where Americans would never dream of using humor to make those points, because those situations aren't happy or joyous. See, the reason we don't go to a funeral telling big jokes and raucously laughing at them is because that would be expressing joy and happiness at a time when maybe close members of the deceased are feeling very sad and lonely, and we would hate to make them feel bad about that. We want to be there with them in their sadness. We don't want to make them feel bad by telling jokes and using humor. this thing that's specifically designed in Americans' mind to express joy and happiness. When you get down to it, this is the reason most of the differences between our countries in the US and the UK use humor differently, is because of the reason why we use them. Again, Americans use humor to express joy, to express happiness, and to laugh. And British people use it for almost everything else. Let me know what you think of that. Is that true for what you've experienced, seeing humor, even in sitcoms, TV shows, and movies between our two countries? I'll link a couple articles below that had some interesting thoughts surrounding humor in the US versus the UK. You can let me know what you think of those as well. Thanks, guys, so much for watching. I hope you found this conversation interesting. If you did, feel free to add to the conversation in the comments below. There's lots of great questions, comments, and conversations happening there. Thanks again, guys, for watching, and as always, see you guys next time.